Former Marine, current Army officer, Iraqi freedom veteran, Taddeus McNeal. Mr. McNeal, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Cool. Let's get into it.
Urban Christian Veterans provides a safe place for Christian veterans of color to discuss the challenges you face in your daily lives. Being a person of color has its challenges. Being a Christian has its challenges. Being a veteran has its challenges. All of those factors being combined makes for a unique and sometimes difficult life experience that is seldom talked about in public forums. Thank you for tuning in to the Urban Christian Veterans Podcast. Here's your host, D. Allen Rose.
Thank you, Aaron, for that wonderful introduction. This is D. Allen Rose, and you are listening to the Urban Christian Veterans Podcast. Well, first, let me thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come with me on this journey today. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy man. How you feeling today? Doing okay?
Busy. This time of year is always amazingly busy for me. Working this summer, just doing stuff still with the service, as well as just stuff with my business, TS Homestays. We'll talk about that a little later, but just always busy. Grateful to be busy. Grateful to be busy.
I heard that. And again, I know you're busy. I know your schedule. And I just really appreciate you coming in today and speaking with me. Before we get too far into it, would you mind telling the audience a little bit about yourself?
A little bit about me. Graduated from Troy University. Played ball there around 2005 to 2007. Did that. Got a chance to be deployed with the military, 5 times? I've been to 5 deployments. Father of 6. And love to travel. Entrepreneur. I love teaching, coaching, training. I love working with soldiers. I love leading soldiers. Core of who I am is just giving as much as I can give so that the day I leave here, I'm empty. And so I do the best I can to keep myself filled so that I have something of substance to pour out to whoever may need it in the time of their need. So that's about it.
Awesome. And in the intro, something I find very interesting, former Marine, current Army officer. Now, I won't ask you how one does that, but I will say that, unless you just want to share that, but to go from the Marine Corps to becoming an Army officer, for one, that's an awesome accomplishment. So hats off to you for that.
Appreciate it.
I'll say also that I can imagine there had to be a serious cultural difference between the two. It seems like it from the outside looking in anyway.
Man, listen, let me tell you a quick story. I got a good friend that I work with at church. He was a pilot in the National Guard. And I've been working with this guy for years and I didn't know it. And when he finally told me, I said, man, I think that's awesome. He's like, would you like a shot at it? So, sure. Who would turn down being a pilot? Sure. So as he got me prepared for everything, one of the first things I had to do was go through OCS here in the state of Alabama. OCS was the first thing I did with the Army. So they would say stuff like the Army song. I had no clue what this Army song was. Their marching is completely different. I was in a leadership position in the first week. My marching was all Marine Corps marching. And I don't think anybody noticed or they didn't say anything to me. Marching an entire battalion. And so, man, listen, you're talking about a culture shock. The running cadences are different. The terms were different. I had to work really hard to catch up really fast. But it was a different world.
I can imagine, man. I can imagine that when I went through basic training, there was a guy that was prior service that came from the Marine Corps, and every now and then they would have him to march us somewhere as squad leader or whatever, and we were like, "What?" They're like, "What?"
Right?
What is this cat saying? Didn't even understand what he was saying. He was just, and I guess if you were to translate it into English, the words are the same, but the way he was saying it was like
totally different.
I don't know,
totally different world.
Yeah. And then he had, I guess, marching. You guys had, what do you call that stuff, man? The different directions, like left oblique,
right, right oblique.
Right. Yeah. I was like, what?
Oh yeah. It's rarely used, but it's there.
Yeah. Well, we we was looking all crazy, but it was fun. But yeah, so I can imagine it being a culture shock, and yeah, he was a little different. Anyway, shout out to him. Yeah, shout out to the Marine Corps.
Hoorah.
Oh, and for those who might be listening and don't know, OCS stands for Officer Candidate School. Is that what they call it
Oh
now?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh, I say that because when I was at Fort Benning and I was going through PLDC, OCS was right next to us, and cats with the blue helmets on, running around like everywhere. I guess that would you could identify them, as opposed to us, because we're all in a training school campus, if you will, but we're PLDC, they're OCS. They're running everywhere they go. Like they're like can't just walk to where you got to go. They got to take off running and in formation and all this other stuff. So I was like, I don't want to do that, man. So anyway, shout out to you. Goodness, that was crazy. But okay, so as we move on, you've got a lot of experience here. I'm just wondering, with everything that you have experienced over the years, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give your younger self about how society would treat you as an urban Christian veteran?
Great question. I would say, first of all, stay more focused on what you think about yourself. Spend time developing your character. For the most part, you're never going to be able to control what others think about you to a point. But what I have learned is that the more time I spend developing myself, the more the character that is developed shines through. And that character becomes the mainstay of how people see you. And they may misunderstand certain things about you. They may have misconceptions about you. They may have prejudgments about you. But once they get a chance to know you, once they've interacted with you, once they've got a chance to speak with others who know you a bit more thoroughly, the depth of your character is what's going to speak for you throughout your life. So spend those formative years, the beginning years. Spend more time not necessarily focused on others' perception of you, but how you want to be perceived by your kids or history. How do you want somebody to tell the story of who you were that really knew you at the end of your days? Someone gave me some great advice. There's a dash on your burial marker, and it's a small dash, but it's the story of your life. Just getting out, seeing yourself. Society has misgivings about you. The only thing that you can control, the only thing that you can worry about is how you develop yourself.
So given the position that you're in, the job that you have, being an officer in the military, and just what I recall from being in, I don't know, at times have changed that much, not that old, but specific to being an officer and looking like us in the military. Imagine there's a young person out there listening, thinking about making that decision about going into the military, even aspiring to reach the heights that you have as an officer. Are there any words of advice, anything that you could let them know to be aware of that they may run into, given the racial makeup and just the history that we face?
Another good question. James Baldwin had a quote, and I'm paraphrasing it. It was, to be a conscious Black man in America is to always be enraged. What I've learned is to see and very carefully measure my words, my actions. As I got older and more mature, I slowed down my responses from body language to facial givings. I would say, as an officer, remember that you are consistently trying to put yourself in a position to make a difference. And so there are things you're going to see that are going to really disturb you. But the goal is to be in a position where you can affect policy, you can affect change, you can affect rulings. You want to be in a position where when you're in the room, your voice counts. And there's going to be opposition. There's going to be people who don't like you. There's going to be people who will belittle you, ignore you, be indifferent towards you. However, your job is to keep putting yourself in a position where you can be effective. There are times I've been in just a position to speak on someone's behalf, and it made a difference. There's times I've been able to make changes or speak up on rules or policies that we want to put in place. Just asking the question. Sometimes it's just asking the question, hey, is this going to affect everyone fairly? What's going to be the optics of this? What's the perception of what we're doing? Who are we really trying to help here? What's what's the actual goal? Are we thinking of the second and third effects? I was privileged enough to work under some general officers of color, and some of the advice that I've received was, remember that your goal is to take care of all soldiers, and although others may not necessarily do things the correct way, soldiers know who do. And so you do the right thing regardless. But you're also in a position that when other soldiers see you, that they're inspired, because someday they're going to have to take the mantle. And so you also want to help them to be in a position from a standpoint of education, of leadership, of discipline, of mindset, to give them all the tools that they need for their opportunity to succeed. Just when they get their shot, they can shine.
Awesome. And I think that when most people hear or read that quote by Mr. Baldwin, I think there's a preconceived notion that what he's talking about is rage that is caused by others who may not look like you.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you read deeper and understand where he was really coming from, is that it can also come from those who do look like you.
Absolutely. Sometimes some of your toughest obstacles. Oh my gosh. There was a general officer that I worked for. I'd worked for him for maybe 2 years. Got a chance to know some family members of his that served as well. Family members were amazing. Got a chance to know this gentleman, and I asked him for a recommendation. I've worked for him for 2 years. He says, "Hey, I don't really know you like that."
Wow.
I said, "Sir, the reason I came and asked you for a recommendation because this other soldier, the same rank, who just got here, asked for a similar recommendation yesterday." So I thought, given that I've known you longer, we've done reviews together, we've done some planning together, we've been to lunch several times. I didn't think that'd be out of line. What he told me was that you needed to work harder to get to know people before you ask for a recommendation. The disappointment. The disappointment. And the frustration.
Ooh.
And I heard that story about that particular officer, a similar story from someone else, and I didn't believe it. I just didn't believe it until it happened to me. I was like, man,
how'd you deal with that? How'd you deal with it? Like, how do you move on from something like that? And not only move on from something like that, but not repeat it. You know what I mean? Not be that, because that's who, a lot of times we look up to people who are above us rank wise. And it's human nature to observe the person who's above you and say, I want to be there. In order to be successful, I have to do what they do. So how do you avoid continuing that sort of behavior through all of that disappointment that you had?
Well, two things. I learned two things from that. The first is that saying I've learned, some will, some won't. So what next? Who's in my circle that could possibly provide those resources? So one, you have to be resourceful. The second thing is hold on to that. Hold on to that. So when you're in that position, you remember that story, you remember that feeling, you remember those emotions and all the things that came with it, as far as the disappointment, the distrust after that. And you remember to tailor how you respond to each individual soldier in the same manner. What I mean by that is that you remember that every time you get an opportunity to help someone. I had a great OCS officer. Everybody at OCS was amazing, but one who stuck out to me in particular was he's Major Patterson now. He's Captain Patterson. Then all he kept saying to me was, it doesn't matter what I'm doing if I'm not helping somebody else, if I'm not putting someone else in position to succeed. So your job is to, as much as I'm poured into you, pour into somebody else. That's the mission. And so I try to live by that. I try to emulate him still. In my head, he's still attacking me. Listen, I do the best I can to remember those stories. And it became, for me, a situation where if someone would ask me for a recommendation, an opportunity to get to know them better. Didn't care color, race, gender, any of those things. So, I know you're asking for this. Not why are you asking for it? What do you plan to achieve here? How can I help you? Here's a couple bits of advice. Here's a couple people to be in contact with. Here's some things to watch out for. Do you need these classes? Are you aware that these are prerequisites? Those types of things. And so it becomes a situation where I find it better to become a great resource for somebody versus a stumbling block. So that's just how I'll try to deal with.
No, that's awesome, man. I think couldn't have said it any better. It's cool that you were able to go through that and not become that, because I know so many others who will emulate whoever they had to deal with, no matter what type of behavior it was, thinking that that is the way to become successful.
Right.
And, they become teachers' pets and,
Yes.
stuff like that.
Yes. Yes.
So, no, that's cool. I'm glad that you didn't go that route. Okay. So along those same lines, again, from a perspective of giving advice to your younger self, from a perspective of someone who is in the military and has to interact with those who have not had served in the military, right? Civilians, they have a tendency to have different standards, different senses of urgency and that sort of thing. And you mentioned earlier those preconceived notions that they may have about you without even knowing you yet. Have you ever run into a situation where your military standards, the way you do things, the cadence that you have has run into a civilian mindset where you had to kind of adjust yourself? And if so, how did you handle that?
Absolutely. Listen. Oh my God. I previously was employed by the VA. I worked at the VA hospital. So most of the people, 95% of the people I work with were veterans, all walks of life, all different branches. I would say something, for example, hey guys, make sure you're in proper uniform. We want to be uniform across the board. This is something I would expect to be commonly understood. Well, we're not in the military anymore. We want to be individuals.
Uh-oh. Wow.
I get that. I hear you. However, we have policies and guidelines in place for, certain reasons, certain things. You can't talk to me like that. I'm not in the military. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fuss. I was just stating policy. How do I say this? There are times when I suspected that it wasn't a military issue as much as it might have been a perception issue that didn't necessarily line up with the military, if you know what I mean. And so there were meetings that would come in, and I'm not yelling, but I try to speak with a command present. I can remember speaking in a room about, 15, 16 of our colleagues, and I was explaining a PowerPoint, as we should all be proficient at as officers and people in the military. And so
right.
At the end of this, one of the critiques that I got was that I came off mean. I came off too direct. I came off angry, upset. And we were talking about a supply chain. There was little to no emotion in this. It wasn't my supply chain. It didn't affect me in any type of way. I was just kind of letting everybody know how things work. And the people who said this, when I would talk to people who look like me, I would say, oh man, I definitely didn't want to come off that way. And it was like, what are you talking about? It's like, I've got like 3 comments that says came off a little upset, a little angry, and they were saying, oh yeah, we get this too. Yeah, we usually get that too. So what we have to do is have as little passion, remove all passion from your voice. Try not to make direct eye contact. Those types of things. I was like, wait a minute, weren't we in the military? Like everyone here?
Wow.
This is I was expecting to be in an environment that this would be a bit more acceptable. It was different. And so I did the best that I could to soften myself, if that makes sense. Which you're almost doing through gritted teeth. And I understand that not everyone maintains that military discipline, bearing, all those different types of things. That to each his own. However, as direct and as much as I would try to follow policy and stick to the guidelines or the SOPs to whatever we had to do, more often times than not, it was people who really felt like they wanted to do their own thing that would give you the hardest time. And so in the military, listen, doing your own thing is not rewarded. It's following suit. That outside the military, following suit or being, I guess as they saw it, conforming, is far from what you want to do. But listen, this is how we're going to get the job done, though.
With your dignified self, brother, being the Army officer that you are, I know there's certain things you can't say, but guess what? I can say it.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say it for you.
Okay.
So no matter how professional you are, how together you may have it, those that don't look like us are not comfortable with us unless we are in a certain position. And what I mean by position, I'm not talking title. I'm talking a subservient position, regardless of what your title is, how much you make or whatever. As long as I'll put it this way. The great theologian, Nobel Peace Prize winner, Albert Schweitzer said, as it relates to black and white relations, he being a white man said that the black man is a brother, but he's the little brother.
Ooh. Mm.
Yeah, and they gave that man a Peace Prize. But anyway, let me just so that's where I'm going with it. So anyway, you get what I'm saying. That's I think that is what you ran into, and you can't say it, but I can because I'm a civilian. So okay. So what's the one thing people get wrong about you the most?
So I will pause before I speak because I want to do the best I can to communicate or convey a particular idea or thought. A lot of time the pause is thought as maybe I don't know what to say. I'm making something up, trying to come up with something because I took my time. What I've learned is wisdom speaks slowly. I heard, I was in a briefing once. In this briefing, I'm being questioned by two major generals, one general, two full bird colonels. They would ask me a question, one command sergeant major. They asked me a question, pause, and I give the best answer I could. The two major generals afterwards said, hey, I appreciate you taking your time. Most of the people give us the first thing that comes to mind, trying to hurry up and get off the hot seat, and it tends to be detrimental. Mm-hmm. One of the colonels pulled me aside and said, hey, you need to have everything prepared and laid out. You need to know, boom, 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 exactly what you're going to say. Sir, I appreciate the advice, but all due respect, I don't know what they're going to ask. And I want to give the best answer, and I want to think about it. It says, no. You need to have everything just right off the head. If not, they're going to think you're BSing them. Okay. I might have to run with that one then, sir. And let them do so. But I think the quality of my answer give away what's really going on. He didn't like that answer. So it's amazing the different perspectives you get sometimes. So I've learned to really take my time with those. And just as I've gotten older as well, just trying to pull some of the emotion out of some of my responses sometimes. Somebody, listen, I am not the believer that there's a stupid question. There are stupid questions. And sometimes you got to pull the, hey, sir, you asked a stupid question out of your tone, out of the response. So I'm getting better at that. And so
no, that's good.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you're right there. We typically say there are no stupid questions. However, like you said, there are stupid questions. And a lot of times, what do the young people call it? Trolling, right? They know it's a stupid question. They're using their aggressiveness towards you in question format.
With that said, share a quick story. Not too long ago, I was on a deployment. I was briefing a lieutenant colonel some plans. Now, these plans I've already briefed to a major general. I've briefed to a full bird, two command sergeant majors, and some government officials. I just say it like that, government officials. And those government officials were directly out of the White House. So we had these plans set. And I think we did the plans a week prior. Everything's in stone. Everyone's in place. We know our times, destinations, time hacks, all those different things. I had to brief a lieutenant colonel who was riding along with us. He wanted a full brief. Okay, not a problem. So I briefed this lieutenant colonel, and he said, I'm looking at the plan. I don't understand why it's not linear. What do you mean, sir, not linear? Well, you're picking this person up here, and you're going here, and you're going to go here, and you're going to go here. I'm just a country boy, but if I pick somebody up here, I don't understand. Why don't we just go in a straight line? I remember the thought of, am I being punked right now? It's like, is this a prank? What do you mean? Like, the hotel's over here, the airport's here, the meeting place is here. This person who came from DC for this meeting is only going to be in town for an hour. I'm not just, sir. You know how this works? And he started to request changes to make it linear. So it just goes from left to right on the map. After hours, literally, when I say hours, I'm talking 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 hours of urging this colonel to reconsider. We had to bring in two other majors to say, sir, this is not a good idea. Because he's going to have to call DC, let them know their changes, just because they're going to ask what the changes are for. Well, we want to make it more linear, sir. Yeah, that's going to play out well. And so, I don't know. Sometimes, man, I don't know, man. Listen, I'm just the captain. I don't know much, but I know that wasn't going to work out well. Oh my God.
Okay, understood. Some of the things we go through.
Yeah.
So is there Is there anything you wish I would have asked? And if so, what and how would you answer?
I think I wish you would have asked. I guess what was some of my biggest obstacles, I guess? And the way I would answer that is it's two. First, you have the mental obstacle, which is, and I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, how you see yourself and how you see your world around you, the things you came from, the things you personally fear, the things that alarm you, and then the reality of how those fit in your world or in the military or being outside of the military. An example of this is with a group of soldiers. I'm the only black officer. They want to go out to a bar. I'm down. Let's go. We get to this bar. I'm the only black guy in there. And I'm nervous and I'm trying to explain to them, hey guys, yo, I don't even know what town this is. I know we're in the South.
Wow.
I don't know. This is a good idea. Well, McNeal, listen, you're good. You're with us. That means nothing to me. That means nothing to me. He was like, listen, man, if something pops off, we'll call the cops. Do you understand what you just said to me? do you understand?
Oh,
how do I explain to you? I live in a bit different world. You know, it was tough. I have two sons who are in the military, trying to explain to them how to navigate through those situations with different roommates and friends and superior. I had one son who was telling me about a situation where he got in trouble for doing something very minor. And in this situation, he felt like his superiors were extra hard on him, and he did everything he could to be, for example, just an outstanding soldier. His PT scores are amazing. His performance scores are amazing. He just won a board. He's doing everything he can to be a model serviceman. And he said this tiny little thing that it's in his direct superior didn't want to write him up for, another officer saw and wanted to hit him with the book. He was saying it was so demoralizing. He was saying they painted me as the worst airman ever. It was just the worst ever. He kept saying, I felt like they kept digging to find more and more and more on me. He said, and all I wanted to do is just I'm trying to be the top. Just trying to be the cream of the crop. He said, I wanted to give up. Just, it wasn't worth it. I lost all my love for the service going through that one thing. And just trying to encourage him, you know, this is temporary. You won't always have commands like this. And he said it was really only one person, but no one he felt fought for him, or was in a position to fight for him, or looked like him that seemed like they cared. And there was different misconceptions he thought about him, or where he came from, or what his life was like before then. Well, I'll leave it there. That's been hard. And sometimes having conversations or sitting in meetings where you wholly disagree with the policies that are put on the table, the ideas that are going forth. And when you make statements like, hey, how do you think the rest of the soldiers are going to perceive what we're doing? I don't see what the problem is. And trying to make others who don't live in my world aware of the perception of what they're doing, of what they're saying, or their actions. Some things don't hurt some soldiers in the same manner. I was recently with a unit that amongst the soldiers who were receiving punishments, different punishments for different things, the number of African Americans that were hit with, I call it being hit with the book or getting max punishment, were far outweighing the soldiers that didn't look like them. And when it was brought up,
Article 15s.
absolutely, hitting with that UCMJ, man. And when it was brought up, it was, hey, you know, we're trying to be fair across the board on one conversation. And then on a different conversation is, hey, we need to take every situation differently, because we need to look at it, because not all the situations are the same. I was like you guys are dancing. How does this work here and it doesn't work here? If we're fair across the board and this person did this, then all soldiers receive the same thing. If we're looking at each soldier individually, each action individually, how can we then have all these guys receive one thing and all these guys receive something else, or the majority? It was unfair across the board, and it was a lot of red flags that were raised. But having those conversations seemed the most difficult thing. It was always so baffling. Like, I don't see anything I'm doing wrong. This is not an issue. You're making it a race issue. And more oftentimes than not, I didn't say anything about race. And they knew right away kind of where I was coming from. That has been difficult. I haven't had to deal with that at every unit, but there's been a handful of times. It's so blatant. that you have to say something. You have to interject. And you have to be so careful in the manner that you do it, because if you're a bit too direct and forceful, some people will instantly close their ears. But if you're too light handed, they don't take it serious enough. And so that delicate dance, depending on who you're talking to, that's an art form. I haven't mastered it. I don't know many people who have, but amongst the people I've talked to, it's been difficult. It's been amazingly challenging as an African American officer, or I would say that's been the most difficult dance for me.
Wow.
Fighting for equality across the board without asking directly for equality across the board.
Yeah, that's deep, man, and that I think touches directly upon why I'm doing this, and I'm so glad that you said that. You mentioned the word, that delicate dance. It's tiresome. Like, why are we the ones dancing all the time? Yeah. And why are we the ones that have to even be concerned with the latest dance moves, right? I mean, and it goes back to what I said where, and you mentioned it as well. Here it is, you're trying to make this person comfortable with, in essence, you're trying to make them comfortable with your skin. That's what it really comes down to, because they are less concerned with you trying to get them to understand the perception that may be put out there, and they're more concerned with you making them comfortable with you. Does that make sense? It's
absolutely.
Like they'll listen all day to that. Yeah, they'll listen to that. They'll pay attention to that.
Oh yeah.
But anything beyond that, closed ears.
Absolutely.
Don't want to hear it. Suck it up, drive on. And then don't let them pull rank.
Man, listen, too many times, man. I had a conversation with someone who outranked me. And I felt like we brought an issue to someone else that was above both of our ranks that needed to be spoken about. And the person that I came with was also an African American officer, was saying, hey, we don't necessarily got to talk about it, but let's let them know that we feel that things could be handled differently. I was saying, man, listen, let's tell them straight up, you are wrong.
Right.
You are, because it's blatantly, obviously, in every shape, form, or fashion wrong. And we should not be, this code of ethics, we should not be afraid to tell them they're wrong. This is not an opinion thing. This is a fact-based thing. Let's tell them that they're wrong, because they are. What he told me was, well, you got to do a little dance. You got to do a little song and dance for them sometime.
Oh, see.
And if you do the song and dance correctly, they sometimes they'll listen. Me and him had words, man. I can't even remember. This is maybe 30 seconds before we entered this room together. We were not on the same page at all. And as we entered the room together to speak on another soldier's behalf, I had to calm myself down. I was direct. I tried to pull all the emotion from my voice and tried to stick with the facts. I was looking for one result. Initially, we thought we were on the same page about the result we were looking for, but what he decided to do was say, you could back off a little bit. You could, we just want you to look into it. And I was saying, no, this is wrong. This needs to be changed. This needs to be fixed for this particular reason. Here's the paperwork. Here's the signed sworn statements. This needs to be fixed. This needs to be addressed immediately. Let's not wait on it. Let's not think about it. Let's not table it. It needs to be fixed now. This is affecting a soldier's life big time. And so he was upset with me. And when we were done, he was like, I am such and such rank. If I say we're going to handle it this way, we're going to have Roger, sir.
Pulled rank. Wow.
But listen, that's tough, man.
Well, no, I get it, man. And yeah, I don't want to dwell on that too long, but I will say that I won't call it advice, but just something to be aware of as a veteran now. Experiences like that can be traumatic and stay with you. Yeah. And so somehow, some way, while you're going through it, while you're still in, you got to find some self-care, man. You gotta find.
Absolutely.
You got to find a way to, trust me when I tell you that stuff can linger. And on top of that, there's a word for it that I learned years ago, micro inequities. Mm-hmm. If you ever look that up, it's almost like saying death by 1,000 cuts. You're getting cut every day. Sometimes it's blatant. Sometimes it's off to the side. You don't see it.
Super subtle.
Yeah, super subtle. But those cuts, they scar. And sometimes they don't heal at all. They're just cuts. And so you don't want to get out and have a whole bunch of cuts that have never been treated, because it'll stay with you. So just keep that in mind.
You know, along the same lines, man, I've had small seasons where it can really get tough. For example, around elections, around craziness as far as current events goes, things that happen in the news where everyone seems to have an opinion, and it seems like certain soldiers tend to be very comfortable sharing their political views, sharing their opinions on what's going on in the news. Although you feel it's totally counter to what is right, what the military values are, and what may be best for you and your family. You're less likely to comment on those things, but you start to feel them. And then you start noticing the people that agree with those thoughts that this person shares, and it floors you because you didn't know this guy you've been going to lunch with felt this way.
Right.
This guy you've been hanging out with, you've been playing on shooting hoops with, or start lifting in the weight room with, is totally on a side that you would never even consider. And sometimes you have to push it aside, but then there's times, man, you're like, I can't believe you see this like this. Do you realize how this affects me? We're supposed to be brothers, prepared to die for one another. And based on what you're saying or this person's saying, I don't really matter.
Right.
That's interesting.
Well, I think my man said it best when he says, I don't think he's a racist, but the racists think he's a racist. Anyway, my bad.
Listen,
I didn't go there. But anyway.
Man, you know what, man? I think that might be, it's funny. I've worked in the office once with, I think it was 13 other soldiers, one other African-American soldier. And you would hear them just throw things back and forth when certain things come across the news. And we're passing each other, we're looking at eeach other when we pass each other and just shaking our heads. And it's like we're in total communication or total sync without saying a word. We haven't said a word. We hadn't texted anything. We just, and you get home and you're a bit heavy and you're disconnected. And you start wondering, man, I thought this was, one band, one fight. I thought, that all that we'd been through as far as training and combat and missions and all these other things, share pictures, talk about our kids and all this other stuff. This is my value to you. And what I realized in certain times, I would find myself closing myself off. And I can only speak as a man, just as a man, it's not good for you to go into yourself. And I'm not, to be honest, I'm no psychologist, but I'm sure, and I would tell soldiers, it's not, although some soldiers are introverts, it's not good to wholly always be into yourself, but it would make you feel like drawing into yourself was the only way to mentally survive.
Absolutely.
I would say carefully voice your opinion. Oftentimes, other people assume that because you didn't say anything that you agree with them. And so I can remember having some very candid conversations with people saying, why do you feel this way? Doesn't this work out for you? Heck no, it don't work. What do you? No, because I'm going to be on the losing end of this. This is why. Here's the conversations I have to have with my children. Here's the things that we cannot do. Listen, I will be in uniform driving home at the end of the day, but I am hyper aware that means nothing, depending on who may pull me over, depending on what may happen at a gas station, depending on who may feel a certain way in a grocery store. That means nothing for me. Well, I mean, you're wearing the uniform. Man, have you not been paying attention?
Yeah. See, the only thing I can do is laugh, man, because what comes to mind is when your boss, your ultimate boss, said, look at my African American.
Listen.
Doesn't he look happy over there?
Listen, I was like, oh my God. Listen, man, if y'all don't turn this TV off, man. Man, I got stories I can't even tell.
Yeah.
Listen.
I get it.
Oh man. I'll tell you what, it was an older soldier. I'll put it like this. I think he recently retired. We went to lunch one day. He doesn't say much. And he was saying, I've been listening to you talk to this other person a little bit about some of the stuff that's been going on. And I think this and this about it. What do you think? I was I'm not going to lie, man. I was shocked that he asked me this. I was honest with him. I said, hey, man, this is what I feel. This is why I feel it. This is what I've historically experienced. This is what historically has happened from my perspective. He said, wow, nobody has ever told me that. He said, nobody's ever told me that. I've been in the military however many years. Nobody's ever told me that. I said, why did I have to need to tell you He said, because think about it. He said, just think about it. When I go home, all I'm around is people that look like me. When I go to my church, only people I'm around is people that think like me. My brothers, my sisters, my mom, my aunt. This is all that I'm around. And so I don't really get a different perspective. And when I do, it's from, snippets on Facebook or the news or something like that. And I don't know that person. So I don't really give much validation to it. But hearing your opinion, I'd never even considered it this way. I was like, wow. In the coming months after that, he began to kind of ask me more questions, and he was saying it was eye-opening, and he was sharing it with his wife and talking to his kids about it. So I think it's important to remember that we really are supposed to judge each other by the content of our character and not see everyone the same across the board. There's so many who are willing to be open now. There's so many people who are really willing to connect to you. And as we talked more, we became friends. I consider him a good friend now. He said he's changed his views about some things. And I was happy to be a part of that. Later on, he said, hey, man, why don't you talk to some other buddies about this? I said, Muhammad Ali once made this statement. Listen, about some snakes. Listen, I don't know which snakes are poisonous. They all look the same.
Whoa.
He said, I can understand. I can understand. And I was grateful to share that experience with him. And to be honest, a lot of soldiers, and Marines. I've worked with some incredible soldiers, incredible Marines, all colors, shape, forms, fashions, genders, everything. Listen, there's some phenomenal servicemen out there. I recently worked with a sergeant major. It's a white sergeant major. This man had more education on exactly how to treat each soldier individually while still jacking them up and making them feel like they were special and doing it in such a manner that he respected everyone across the board. It was masterful. I watched him chew someone out, and I wanted to give him a standing ovation. And the soldier was like, I feel like a better person now.
Wow.
But
there you go.
But he said, I felt respected in the same manner. And when I somewhat probed the sergeant major about it, he said, I started to realize when I was younger that others had a different perception than I did. Others' backgrounds made a difference in how they received what I said. And so when I start tailoring what I said versus echoing all the same things I heard my sergeant majors, my first sergeant say, it resonated differently with those soldiers. And I was able to connect with them. Once I was able to connect with them, I was able to get more from them because I understood them, or at least I tried to. And I think that's what all good soldiers are striving to do. And once you transition and you're out, now it becomes still trying to connect with people, letting them know that you care about them, but at the same time, giving them an opportunity to show you who they really are, good or bad, instead of kind of assuming.
Right.
And I think that's all we want
well said.
At the end of the day. That's all we want.
Well said. I agree. To those two gentlemen that you just mentioned, I'll just say it's like there's this powerful, what I would call European, Eurocentric echo chamber. It is powerful. And if you don't step outside, I say if they don't step outside of that echo chamber, then what's said in there becomes contagious. But to hear that you had someone who, instead of echoing, decided to listen to the other perspectives, I think that's powerful. That's awesome.
Absolutely, man.
So,
with that said, there's people on that other side too who won't listen to nothing you say, no matter what you say, no matter how you say it.
Oh yeah, as I said, it's powerful.
And the funniest part about that, and I think we've had some conversations about this. They couldn't tell you why they believe that way.
The echo chamber, man.
Listen, because I heard
it bounce off the wall.
Listen, my mom said, my dad. Did you think about it? Did you do any history? Deep diving about it at all? Nope.
I heard it bounce off the wall 3-4 times, so it must be true.
Absolutely.
So, man, this has been great. Before I let you go, I want to get your take on some current events. Over the last month, the current events seem like they haven't changed. They more or less have stacked. And right now, the big one that everyone's talking about, especially since we're still in the week of the 4th of July, is the whole gun violence situation. So I'm not going to bring up any particular incident, but I just want to get your thoughts overall. What do you think about what's happening regarding the whole gun violence situation?
First of all, my heart goes out to those families who lost somebody in this situation. I God, I couldn't imagine. So I started off in the Marine Corps. We have some very strict weapons rules. Keep your finger straight and off trigger till you're ready to fire. Don't aim your weapon at anything you do not intend to shoot. I can remember the discipline that we learned, or we had to adhere to when we were in Iraq, in that although someone could be pointing a weapon at us, and we knew they were the enemy, we weren't allowed to fire until they fired at us. And I never watched anybody violate that policy. Now listen, we was pissed off, young, ready to go home, can't wait to fight Marines. And I watched nobody violate that policy. Nobody. I have a hard time understanding how American citizens can't receive the same treatment. I also question, I don't necessarily see the U.S. removing guns, but there's a lot of training that needs to be had by gun owners. And if it was me, I think the thing that I would incorporate is a lot more gun education and a lot more gun training before you earn the right to hold one or carry one. It's a little different for each state, but as far as it being in civilian hands. Also, I remember in the military being told, you have to take a life, you're accountable for it. It's going to be investigated. Make sure that you did the right thing, which made us very leery. Everybody wants to do what they got to do to come home. And we did, but you want to make sure you did the right thing. Whatever those rules of engagement are, that we followed them to the T. And you would wish that law enforcement would be consistent across the board. But if you study the history of law enforcement in the U.S., you understand the origins of law enforcement. What's happening now seems to be apropos for what it was created for in the first place. But when it comes to mass shootings, you will also hope that America be wise enough at some point to start seeing what's working in other countries. And maybe not all of those things, but maybe integrating some of those policies, maybe shaped for us, that would make these types of situations more difficult. It's hard. I don't care what race the person is, man. Just watch somebody senselessly take a life. Lord have mercy. And then on the end, you're going every week now. Every week, kids are sub. And I'm thinking, listen, God just went in and took out elementary kids. That wasn't enough to make somebody really change some policies.
Nope.
And then you do a deep dive, you'd understand, follow the money. You kind of know where the policy is going to end up in what favor. And so, I think what Dr. King was trying to do was to get the country to live up to the things it said in its Constitution it was designed to do. I just wish that we worked a bit more bipartisanly to ensure that everyone was protected on the same level. That's it for me. At the end of the day, politicians, what can you do to make sure it's not your kid or your cousin's kid or your sister's kid or kid that doesn't live in your residence or neighborhood or a hometown or go to that particular school, Right. Second, what was your sister out there? Your mom, your aunt? Listen, at some point, if you have a heart, where do we go from here? We are considered the best as far as countries. Let's prove it. For the most part, especially as military guys, we're always looking to adapt and overcome. Let's adapt and overcome.
Wow. Well said, brother. Well said. All right. Well, we have come to the end of this, and let me tell you, man, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that you will come back so we can talk about some more things. I feel like you was holding back, man. I feel like there was some things.
I was. Listen. I'm still in, so I got to be careful with names, places, and dates, because. But listen,
I got you.
I've been so fortunate to have about a 20-year career now. I've been so fortunate to work with so many great soldiers. A couple years ago, I led a church group where we got a chance as veterans to sit down and talk on a weekly basis about some of the things that we dealt with and got a chance to go through. It's been a privilege to serve. It's been an honor. I am working on doing the best I can to communicate that all our soldiers have the same value, which is high. All our soldiers or service members are deserving of tailor-made treatment. And what I said by that is one of the best leaders I've ever had. What I mean by that is one of the best leaders I ever had said, you don't treat everybody across the board because everybody's not the same across the board. You treat everybody fair and equally, but based on their particular situation. And I think that the military forgets sometimes, as well as I guess organizations that work with us as veterans, that what we need sometimes is tailored assistance, tailored programs. our backgrounds are different. Our environments are different. Our thought processes are completely different. And what may work for one may not work for someone else. But I think we have the resources to do it. I just believe sometimes we get a little caught up in, hey, this is what we've always done.
True.
We don't seek to move forward or seek to make the adjustment. I would just love to see that. I'm working toward making sure that happens in the organizations I'm a part of.
Awesome. Well, listen, brother, thank you for coming out today. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And also thank you for your continued service. I wish you Godspeed there. I wish you protection. I pray for your safety. And with that said, may God bless you. May God keep you. And may God continue to be with you. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.